Hi everyone, and thank you so much for joining me today to go over our Tints and Shades landscapes. And I just wanted to first and foremost give a shout out to the teacher that I'm in for because she is the creator of this lesson and she put everything together. And this is just my own little spin and a little bit of an adaptation based on working at home versus in the classroom. So a couple things that I wanted to point out is number one, in some of the examples, they show paint. So in this tutorial, I wanted to show you how things might look if you're using supplies that you might have accessible at home, such as what I do, which is more like markers and crayons, what that might look like and how we'll change the lesson a little bit to work from home. And then also too, I just wanted to go over some ways of getting started on your outlines. So I'm going to show you a mountainscape. And then you can obviously just take a look and think of some of the techniques based on what you want to create, okay? So you have a lot of options there, a lot of choices. I've given you a bunch in the slideshow, but you are able to look for your own inspiration without a problem. So please feel free to do that. So the first thing I wanted to go over is our value, which is our tones, tints, and shades. And as you can see, I worked mine in crayon. And this is a sample that I showed you in your slides. And of course, that one was done in paint. So it's a lot more smooth than mine is, because obviously paint you could just kind of lay out and it's really, it goes down so neatly and it's easier to mix and blend. So I wanted to show you a little bit more realistic version for what we do at home based on using crayons. So what I did was I took my aqua blue and I laid it out in my first box. Now, if you can't print this from your slides at home, don't worry. Just do this in your sketchbook, or you can do this on a plain piece of white paper, no problem. The idea is just to get an idea of how much layering of each color you need to do. So what I did was I took the aqua, I filled in that first space. Then I did the same thing with the next, and I layered in a little bit of white crayon over the top. Okay. You can see, because I'm working with crayon, you're not seeing a huge adjustment in color, but you can see that it gets a little bit later as you move all the way to the end box. So what I did was I layered the white over each part of the aqua blue, and I pressed the hardest on the outside to make this the lightest color. Then I went through the same process with the aqua blue in the first box just to see the base color, and then I went ahead and I added in my gray. Now I used a little bit of a lighter gray, so I feel like it did get a little bit patchy, but then I went back over it with a little bit of a darker gray and it seemed to help a little bit. Okay. Another tip I would give you is you can always take an eraser, and if you see any big marks, you can try and blend that out a little bit. Okay. And that would work for your landscape as well as your practice. Then the last thing you can do is you can take your aqua or whatever color you're working in, layer it here, and then I added in a little bit of a black tint over here. Okay, this one was obviously pretty dark. I went a little too dark on that one. And then I went later and then later in the last. Okay, so those are some ideas as far as how your colors will look. Now, the other thing that's really important besides this practice to do right now is to set up your outline. So what I did was I just went ahead and pencil, of course, in this case, and I went ahead and I marked out my big shapes. So since I'm doing a mountainscape, I really focused on triangle, all the triangular shapes. And then I made sure that I put these little kind of a trail mark in here, because what will happen is we're going to layer color out in different sections, and that's going to help us to do, each section in a different tint or shade. And so you can just continue to add some of those vertical lines, a little bit of a wavy line in here. And as you can see, I made sure that some of my mountains are in the back and some are in the front. So what I'm going to do is for this one, I want to erase a little bit of this line so that it looks like it's in the front. Okay. And again, this is why we always sketch in pencil, so you can make any of these adjustments so that you can see the way the background and the foreground are supposed to set up. Okay. I might even, this has a little bit of a hole in it here, so I'm going to go ahead and add another little peak, make it a little pointier at the top, a little more of a peak. All right. And then go ahead and add in some more lines to separate everything out. Okay. So the first two steps for today, like I mentioned, are to practice your shading based on adding in grays, black and white, and then also to set up your outline. Again, this is just my sample and just very basic shapes that I looked for. And then you'll do the same with whatever landscape you're looking at. Look at those big basic outline shapes And then just make sure that yours matches what's in the foreground and what's in the background, like I mentioned. Okay, and again, make sure that everything is filled in as well. I might add in another little peak right here. It looks a little bit empty there too. So I'm going to go ahead and add in another little bit of my triangular shape and a little bit more of my lines to separate it out. Okay, so this will be our first step. Our next step is going to be actually shading the landscape itself. So please be sure to hold on to your work for the next tutorial.